something bad would happen to a woman down there. I'm enormously claustrophobic and do my own research. So that became just a stubborn sticking point of wanting to go down. There's one elevator that takes you down the construction site. Only 8 people fit. It's an open cage. And as you go down, it takes 4 minutes in this elevator to get, to get to the bottom taxi. I mean, I did not stay very long. I kind of took my pictures and talked to people and went back up. But it's one of the creepiest settings I've ever been to. Water keeps seeping in all the way down, and of course it never occurred to me, but as you start to descend in this elevator, by the time you're a minute down, a quarter of the way down, you lose all of the light overhead. The opening becomes a pinhole. There are bare light bulbs on the wall. But I just knew that something terrible was going to happen to somebody in that tunnel. And so it explores the history of water coming to New York and the fact and how we deal with it now and what would happen to us if we don't get this tunnel built on time. And then Alex is on trial with this very talented, dazzling adversary who's giving her a hard time, and her defendant is a very fancy Park Avenue businessman who does not seem to be a likely murder suspect. And even more bizarrely, an explosion happens in the tunnel, and her defendant, Brendan Quillian, is somehow connected to this explosion 60 stories underground. So that's the story I begin to weave.
And in your last book, if I remember right, we were at the Metropolitan, another Metropolitan, but this time the Metropolitan Opera,
yes,
where someone is murdered in the Opera House, and that was based on the actual case of the violinist that was killed during a performance.
That's right. In 1980, when I was a young prosecutor and didn't work on the case, but I was fascinated, like many New Yorkers, with the fact that this violinist was murdered during a performance, during intermission, when 4,000 people were in the house, and nobody heard a struggle, nobody noted her disappearance. The third act began, and the woman who had the seat behind her just moved forward, stowed the violin, and everybody went their own way. So again, I create my own story, my own motive, but it goes directly to the fact that a murder happened in the cultural center of New York City with thousands of people under the same roof.
You're lucky that you have, due to your own visibility and charm, the entree to the people who actually run these institutions. But what kind of reaction do you get for them when you show up and say, I think I'm going to kill somebody here in the Opera House?
I'm so glad you asked. Beverly Sills, who is a longtime friend of my husband's, was the most gracious. And I said, Beverly, someone's going to die in the opera. And she said, I trust you. I've read the books. I think I have the most beautiful house in the world. And she appreciates the way that I write these love stories, I think, historically to New York. So she knew it was going to come out all right. Now, the Bone Vault, Ellen Futter, who is a great friend and a lawyer and the first woman president of the museum, was very unhappy, to put it mildly, about my going into the museum. And it was only because I met someone in a bookstore who was a librarian, a rare books librarian at the museum, who said, I'll take you in.
That was the Museum of Natural History,
yes,
right?
Natural History,
not
exactly.
The Museum of Art. Right. I mean, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Yeah.
Yes. And I got in the back door. And only recently, when this movie Night at the Museum came out, this sort of children's comedy, did I say to Ellen at Christmas time over drinks, now, come on, you've let them go in and have these dioramas come to life and do things. It's time we put the Bone Vault in the bookshop and sell it at the museum. Get over the fact that, and the mail that I get that says, you know, it makes me want to go back to the museum, and I never knew the history. That's what's the most fun about it. But getting into some of the places, getting into the tunnel in this book was not easy, in large part because of this very superstitious, and of course it's dangerous. I mean, you have to sign a waiver, and truly, I did not want to be down long.
What about the Dead House? Is that an uninhabited building on Roosevelt Island?
Yes, and the Dead, and this is a little bit funny because the Dead House, I think, is the most beautiful structure in New York City. It sits in the East River, as you know, off Manhattan, and that tram that goes to Roosevelt Island. Well, the north part of Roosevelt Island is very modern and rebuilt, and this is the building that was called the Dead House, is an old Scottish word that means morgue, was the only landmark, is the only landmark ruin in New York City.
Right.
And so many of the devoted readers, and you know how devoted they become when they find a crime novelist they like, say, well, I've taken the tram, I came from Australia and I took the tram, and you can't get, why didn't you tell me you can't get to the dead house? And even in the book, it is cordoned off. There's a big security gate around it, which one of the bad guys knew how to get through. I mean, one could do it with wire cutters, risking arrest. But it's in such a precarious condition, the old stones and rocks, because the state hasn't spent the money to restore it, and so it's locked off because one could easily get hurt if these huge boulders fell off the parapet. But it's the structure is there, and many of your viewers will know the name Arnold Skaki, one of the great fashion designers who designed all of Barbara Bush's gowns and whatever, lives in Manhattan in a fancy apartment that faces the dead house, and he thought it was the most beautiful structure in New York, and he paid for the lighting inside the bones of the building to light it up at night.
Did he?
And I used to drive home late at night from the DA's office, and I saw it every night on my way home, and just it looked more like Manderley, like Daphne du Maurier's Rebecca.
From Rebecca,
right. And the opening last night I dreamed of was at Manderley, and there was, it just looks like a castle in the middle of the East River. So that, just being drawn to it visually is what sent me there and gave me a whole book.
Mr. Skaki was here for the kidney lunch a couple years ago, and I remember talking to him. I wish I'd known that. I would have thanked him.
He's a lovely guy.
I was thinking about some of the other institutions. Of course, it isn't always an institution, because in Entombed it was something, well, that's not true. You went to the gardens that your husband knew.
Garden, right?
Yeah.
And Poe's house,
Exactly.
the Poe Cottage in the Bronx.
Right.
So,
but there's the NYPL. I mean, there's the
I'm
library. Bryant Park would be so much fun.
Oh, that's
You'll have to talk to Larry Block, because you do know that he has 2 benches there.
Yes,
there's the Bernie Rodenbar bench, and then there's also the Matt Scudder bench.
Oh yes.
He told me that story. You know, I'm trying to remember. It was like they raised funds for one, and then the other character sulked. So he's got both. But there's certainly that, and there's certainly MoMA, and there's I'm in Grand Central Station.
I've got notebooks full of clippings, and the public library, which I love, is one of them. And there are literally miles, I want to say 6, I'm not entirely sure, but underneath Bryant Park. And as you know from people who donate collections and books, and also donate with them many other artifacts that the library can't use or hasn't used, and they know now their biggest contributor by any, I'm not Mrs. Astor, but one of the reasons I love libraries in any event, but they know I'm coming. They know I'm coming to do research. So
I think you could have a really good time with that. You should talk to Bill Bauman on Madison, the rare books guy. But you could do a bibliomystery. You could. I
love.
Pretend you're Dan Brown there for a moment or something. No, but seriously. Dan
Brown, John Donning.
But I think the NYPL. I've gone to lots of exhibitions there, because it isn't just books. They have drawings. They have maps.
Yes. Oh, yes.
And Barbara Parker just wrote a really interesting book called A Perfect Fake, which is all about valuable maps and forging maps, and how much money is in maps.
I like Barbara Parker a lot.
I like her too. I think you may find that the research got in the way of the storytelling. I did. So I give her real big points, for the maps and all of that. I think that she could never quite get out of the way of the research. So I thought that the book suffered as a story. But who cared? Because, I said to my customers, readers nonfiction.
Well,
that's good enough.
And there's another one called The Island of Lost Maps, which is I believe nonfiction. I know, but I feel the same way. And it's a danger with my own books. You get so involved in the research, and if you love what you're researching, there's such a fine line between just saying to the reader, "Here's everything I learned about the New York Public Library and its books and its maps," as opposed to, "Here's an interesting story that's got suspense and thrilling elements and mystery." So it's a very fine line.